Hey guys, welcome back to the Fantasy Labs podcast. This is Bryan. I am sitting here on Sunday night about to go over the Monday slate of games. We have a fairly large Monday slate. It's 9 games, and I'm actually by myself tonight. So going to try to go through all the games and do the best I can by myself. But yeah, so we'll see how it goes. These solo podcasts are not too easy. But we definitely don't want to not do them just because of our schedule. So we'll do our best. But so I'm going to start going through these games. We got 9 on the slate, 2 at 7, 3 at 7:30, and then there's no late games tomorrow night. 4 at 8 o'clock, but none at 10:30. So over pretty early. We'll go through. So the first one that we'll start with is Detroit at Charlotte. 195 is the total right now, and Charlotte is 3.5-point favorites, which is pretty low. So it's kind of what you would expect out of an Eastern Conference game. Charlotte's been pretty up tempo and been over that mark for most of the year, and Detroit has been a little bit as well. But Detroit's coming off a back-to-back. They're playing, or they played today, but I don't think that's actually going to be that huge of a deal. They played the Lakers, who were not very good, and Detroit kind of rolled through them. They ended up winning by 20 or so, and their best players, obviously Drummond and Reggie Jackson, the guys who were really concerned with getting extended minutes, didn't really even play that much because the game wasn't very close. Drummond got like 24 minutes or something like that, and still put up like 18 and 15, something ridiculous, in just a short amount of time. And Reggie Jackson didn't even get 30 minutes either. So I don't think it's really a spot where you have to worry about the back-to-back. None of these players really played a whole lot. So I think they'll be plenty rested. I mean, obviously it's not a road or on the road second half of a back-to-back is always a little tough, but getting the Lakers on the first part of that is always a nice break. So I think kind of usual suspects. Drummond is in play. He's just a monster. He's at 93 on DraftKings. So let's see what that puts him at. Implied, that puts him at 41.4 DraftKings points. He was over that in 24 minutes today. His last game before that against Milwaukee, he played 36 minutes and had 58 fantasy points. Last others, he had 44, 56, 50. Just kind of a monster. He's way above. He really is probably still significantly underpriced compared to what he should be at, even though he is kind of by far the highest center. Let's see where the second center is. So he is at 93. Yeah, and the next closest guy is Pau Gasol at 75. So he's almost got a 2K advantage on him as far as salary goes. But I don't think that even really kind of hits on where Drummond's value should be because he's just been a beast. Reggie is in a good spot here. Kemba's not a fantastic guard. He can rack up some steals and he's quick enough to kind of stay in front of people, but not a matchup you're really, really worried about. And Reggie's been pretty hot lately. He obviously had a little bit of a down line tonight, being Sunday, but obviously that was just mostly because of the Lakers. And so this spot's a little bit better. It's about average, DVP says, but if he's going to get a bunch of minutes, and it looks like he probably would, since the total is pretty close, 3.5 to Charlotte, that you would expect Reggie to get the full complement of his point guard minutes. So I think that's a pretty good spot to take him in. I guess you could be a little worried about the low total or the low implied point total, but I'm not too worried about that. I think maybe they kick the back-to-back into that line, and I'm not too worried about that. So I'm really fine with Drummond and Reggie Jackson and cash. I know some people probably wouldn't be on Jackson because of the matchup in the over-under being low, but I'm fine with it, really. Marcus Morris is down here at 6'3". He's not cash for me. He's at 6'3". It's just a little high for his inconsistency. He not the greatest matchup either, especially if he's going up against Batum, which I assume he will. So not anything incredible, really. Ilyasova has been getting, fairly same as he's gotten, a 30 over 30 the last couple, but 4-6 is, I mean, so these guys are potential guys you could target in a tournament. KCP has been down lately. He hasn't been playing too well. And at 4-6, I think there's better places I'd rather go. So really just those two guys at the top are the ones I'm interested in, and maybe Marcus Morris in a tournament. I guess you could go Stanley Johnson. He's was popular after that 42-point fantasy outing against Houston, but I don't think he has been really that good since then, and I think he's still kind of points chasing to go that route. On the other side, Batum has been a monster, and I'm not really scared off the matchup here. I know potentially, so he's listed as a shooting guard, so I think that kind of means that they would assume that he would go against KCP, but I wouldn't assume that. I think he would probably go up against maybe Stanley or Marcus Morris. I'm not sure who would probably get the majority of the minutes, but either way, Batum, I think is better than those two guys, and I'm not too worried about the matchup. He's had two really good games against really bad matchups, honestly. He had 49 DraftKings fantasy points in 35 minutes against Chicago, and he had 41 in 30 minutes against Golden State. So obviously, if you can do it against those two teams, then you could probably really do it against anyone, because he was going against, Jimmy and Clay are really good on the perimeter. So not really worried about that. Kemba is in play here. I don't think he's probably cash territory for me, even though he's actually been really solid. So I wouldn't hate you for it. So he, in 3 of his last 4, he had that down game against Golden State, but that's kind of to be expected. In the last 3 of his last 4, other than that one, he has been right around 40 fantasy points, and his implied point total of 73 would put him right at 32.3. So he's obviously kind of underpriced since he's been close to around 40. And I would say that this is a pretty decent matchup. Reggie Jackson's a good defender, but Kemba's got really high usage with Al Jefferson being out, and I would assume that would probably continue. He's taking about 16, 17 shots a game, and it's not even that he has to hit that many, but he's been kind of involved in all areas, getting a couple. He's been averaging 3 steals in 3 of the last 4 as well. So kind of gets it done from a lot of areas, and it's probably pretty safe. I probably prefer him just a smidge more in tournaments, but he's been pretty consistent other than that Golden State game, so I wouldn't really hate cash either. Marvin is tournament only for me, and I'm not even really enthralled at 5-6. Potentially against Marcus Morris if he plays kind of the bigger or like small ball role with the 4, or really against Ilyasova. I'm not too intrigued by that. Lamb's kind of in that same category, Jeremy Lamb, as KCP. They're right at the same price point, 4-6, and the matchup is he's not getting really that many minutes. He's only gotten low 20s, and at 4-6, he just doesn't really have the upside in that matchup with that low minute total. Zeller is interesting. So he got 32 minutes last game against Chicago. Obviously, Al Jefferson is out, and he's going to be out for probably at least another couple of weeks. So Zeller got 32 minutes against Chicago and had 34 fantasy points. Had 17 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, and a steal. So pretty solid. And so if he's going to be over 30 minutes, which I assume he will be, we'll kind of check in on that tomorrow and see where he's supposed to be at. But if he gets over 30 minutes, and obviously he's definitely in play at 4-4 on DraftKings. Is still really low. Let's see where that would put him at implied points. So 4-4 put him just at 19 DraftKings points, which obviously in 30 minutes, it would be really, really hard for him not to hit that value. So I think he's definitely for sure in play. I guess you could potentially go Lynn in the tournament, but his minutes have been really low. He got 27, 13, 22, 20 in the last 4. And Steve Clifford, the head coach of the Hornets, isn't too steady with his minutes, so I don't think you could definitely go him in cash, and I don't think there's a ton of upside in tournaments either. So that's kind of it for me on that game. So we'll move on. San Antonio at Philly is the next game, and over under is 189.5, and San Antonio is 12.5 point favorite. So this is just disastrously low for the 76ers, and I think it really actually just kind of takes everyone out of play. especially in cash. I mean, I guess you could potentially get cute with Covington, but he's going against Kawhi and he's at 7-3. I mean, do you even really want to chance that? I don't. And Nerlens is cheap. He's at 5'9", just hasn't been good lately. And I know he's potentially going to get, a bunch of minutes and potentially some chance to score because it looks like Okafor might be out again. He already spent those 2 games for his suspension, but it looks like he's got some sort of respiratory infection and is questionable. Isaiah Cannon's questionable. But again, I mean, at that total, I mean, 189 and 12.5-point favorites. I mean, that's just their implied point total is just so low. So I don't really think you could play any of these guys. I mean, again, maybe Covington and Nerlens if you want to get cute. They moved McConnell to point guard and put Cannon at off guard, and it kind of helped a little bit, but a lot of that was garbage time. So not really interested on their side. On San Antonio, it's kind of the opposite. They're potentially in play, but you just got to worry about the blowout factor because Philly is just really, really, really bad right now. So I guess you could go Kawhi, but at 8-6, I mean, in a great matchup, obviously, against Philly. But I'm kind of on the same train. I just don't want to take anyone from cash in this game because I have no clue how bad this game script is going to be on either side. I would assume pretty bad. So you could go San Antonio in tournaments and just hope that maybe they keep it close, Philly does, or maybe they just still give a guy like Kawhi minutes. I don't think they would really extend Aldridge or Duncan in a Philly game, so I really wouldn't go them either way. And same with Parker and these guys. So I think maybe Kawhi is the only potential playable guy here, and I'm not even too thrilled about that. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. Dallas at New York is the next game. We have no line, probably because Dallas is playing right now. And so I guess I just haven't released the line because they want to kind of see how that goes. So we'll kind of just go through the game anyway. So Dallas side, they play tonight, and it looks like the line So Wesley Matthews went off. He had something like 36 real-life points and kind of went off for like 50 DraftKings fantasy points. I can't remember the exact number, but went off tonight. And so the question is that predictive of something that's bound to happen, or what's kind of the deal with that? And I don't know. I'm skeptical, I think. If you look at his past minute loads, he had 34 minutes against Houston, 40 minutes against Portland. Those are dream matchups right now. Those are awful teams. He had then he played Sacramento, and he's getting high mid 30s in all these matchups. He played Sacramento and Denver, and so he's getting a lot of minutes and just not producing. And he's producing at like a half DraftKings point per minute, just not good. So I don't think you can go cash here. I don't know the line, but I would presume it's going to be low. New York plays at a really slow pace, so I don't think it's going to be very high here. And Dallas is coming off a back-to-back as well, so just not a great spot for Wes. I think people are going to points chase a lot, but I'm just not really a believer. I'm a believer in Wes for sure. I thought he was great in Portland in his career, but just hasn't been the same sort of guy. And even though he dialed it back tonight and obviously had a great game tonight, I guess count me among the skeptics until I see that he can do that again, because I'm not entirely sure that's going to be the case, especially back-to-back against a slow-paced New York team. Dirk, I think, is always kind of okay. His salary's up. It's hit $7K. He was down in the low sixes, even just a week and a half ago, and now is up to $7. But it's because he's been killing value. He's been at 47 and 40 the last two games. I'm not sure what he was at tonight, but so that would put him at 31 DraftKings implied fantasy points, which obviously he's been kind of destroying that. I don't think this is a great matchup. So while I think he's probably still a smidge underpriced, even though he's up at 7K, I'm not sure I'm really going to target him in this game, because back-to-back, number one, he's one of the older players in the NBA. And also, number two, it's not a great matchup with Porzingis and Rolo down low. They're actually pretty good, and Porzingis is long enough. He's kind of the only guy that is kind of Dirkish. Porzingis kind of has the same game, so It worries me a little bit on Dirk, so I wouldn't go him in cash, but I think there's some upside in tournaments, so I'll probably have some exposure there. Darren is at 6'6", but been really good lately. He is at 54 and 34 the last 2 games. I wasn't sure where he was at tonight. Let's see where that puts him at, Darren. So put him at right at 29 DraftKings fantasy points, which is a lot lower than probably where he should be. So I think he's definitely fine in cash or tournaments. It looks like Devin Harris went out tonight with some sort of injury, and he's questionable tomorrow because he never returned. Had some sort of rib injury, it looks like. So if he's out, it's not like he was playing really a ton of minutes. I mean, he was getting around 20 minutes, but you would obviously expect that to bump up both Felton and Darren just a little bit. So I think he was already in cash game play. The New York matchup doesn't really worry me either with Calderon. So I think that he's definitely cash for sure. Zaza has been great. He's at 6'3". Not sure I'm on him in cash because of the back-to-back in the Sloan matchup, but he's Zaza. He's been good. He's been a double-double machine, and he probably has a good chance of doing it again. At 6'3", that puts him at 28 fantasy points on DraftKings, which is probably low, so you're probably getting a discount on him. I'm not entirely sure if it is one of the best ones on the slate or close to it. It's probably an average value, so not a guy that I'm going to kind of bust myself to get into my lineup. So, but he's okay for sure. And then you could look here at Parsons and Felton. I think in tournaments, I wouldn't go either of them in cash, but if Devin Harris is out, then you would expect maybe a little bit more minutes for Felton, even on the back-to-back. So at only 4K, I think he's playable. I don't think either of them are safe enough or really have a minute load safe enough that we're 100% confident in where you could go him in cash, but I think in tournaments that's definitely fine. So Melo, we assume, is going to play. He got injured, but it looks like he was just kind of it's just kind of a mild thing. He bumped knees with Giannis in their game against the Bucks, but he looks like he's going to be okay. That was on Saturday, so he's been playing not a ton of minutes, kind of working his way back from some sickness. So I'm a little worried about that. He's down at 7-9, which is really, really nice on DraftKings. So I guess I'm probably actually okay with him in cash. I'm not really too worried about the matchup. And at 7-9, it puts him at implied of 35. So that's pretty reasonable. You would assume that Carmelo is going to get close to 35 or more. So I think he's in safe. He's kind of like Zaza a little bit, where I'm not sure what sort of value you're getting in cash, but he obviously has a lot of upside. So I think he's definitely got a target in tournaments, especially if we get word that he is kind of on track to get his full minute load, and this knee situation is not going to bother him. Porzingis is in a pretty good matchup here. He was a little down on Saturday with foul trouble. He only got 22 minutes against the Bucks. He ended up with 12 points and 7 rebounds, and had 5 turnovers. But that was mostly just because of foul trouble, which is going to happen with rookies. So at 7-9, again, that puts him right at that same implied point total as Melo, and he had crushed that in the last 3 games. So I think he's still low. I'm fine with him in either cash or tournaments. And yeah, he's a pretty good play. I just don't think he's quite gotten to where he probably should be salary-wise. And for New York, it probably is it for me. Aflalo got 32 minutes, but he's another guy who could get a lot of minutes and just not really do much with them. He had 32 minutes, but only had 15 DraftKings points, obviously less than half a DraftKings point per minute. Not going to cut it really in any format. So that's kind of how a lot of these New York guys are. So that's about it for me. Keep on moving. LA at Toronto. Let's see if we got a line here. We do. It's 202 is the total, and Toronto is 13-point favorite. So that makes it interesting. I'll start with LA. So Kobe's got some sort of stomach bug, and apparently they asked him whether he's going to play tomorrow, and he said, if I'm walking, I'm going to play, which is a pretty typical Kobe answer. So not even really sure what that means, and it really doesn't help us because we're not really worried about whether he's going to play. We're worried about whether he's going to take minutes and not really do anything with him, which is probably going to be the case. At 63, he's been over 30 fantasy points. He's been 33, 41, and 32 the last couple. He struggled tonight, but it's probably because of the stomach bug. So I would be off of him in cash for that reason, even though his price is pretty reasonable at 6'3". That puts him at 27.7 DraftKings fantasy points implied. So, obviously he's gotten that in his last 3 healthy games. But, this is a back-to-back LA play today. And I don't know. It's just that it worries me a little bit, especially with the implied point total here in the game. So I'm really not on him in cash. And that probably extends to the rest of these guys. LA is not really, Byron Scott's just not really great at keeping these guys at a high minute total. He played like his entire bench tonight, and they all played like 12 minutes. And like very few of them actually got like higher than 30 minutes, but they all played like 12 to 25, which is just like the worst thing a coach could do for fantasy purposes, because what does that do for us? So I don't think any of these guys are in cash. I guess you could go Randall, Clarkson, Russell. Those guys are all fairly underpriced, I would say. Particularly Russell has looked pretty good in the last couple of games. He didn't really get to play tonight or today in their Sunday matchup, but that's just because of Byron Scott. Lou Williams actually got a team high 32 minutes, and he's gotten 30 in the last 3. So I guess you could go him in tournaments if you want. 43 is fairly intriguing, but that low implied point total is a little worrisome for sure. And in a non-game slate, I'm not really sure if you want to really chance that. On the other side, obviously this is a great spot for the backcourt and Lowry and DeRozan, and but that implied point total is little, or the spread is a little too high for me to be really confident in them in cash. 13 is the spread, which is really, really large. Lowry looked awesome last game. He played the Warriors, played 38 minutes, had 41 points in real life, 3.7 assists, a block, and 4 steals. Actually kind of out Steph, so had 6 threes out of 10, and actually kind of looked the better player out of the 2, even though I know that's probably blasphemy for a lot of people listening to this. But even though the Warriors didn't get the win, Lowry looked fantastic that game. So I think he's playing really, really well right now. I think DeRozan's playing pretty well right now. The problem is that this is just a spot where you're going to have to worry about them not playing the entire fourth quarter, which I think is pretty reasonable at 13-point favorites. It's something you got to worry about. So I think you should probably have some exposure to this game just because the matchup is so good. But I wouldn't really target it too hard. I wouldn't go in cash. I mean, I guess you could if you're not worried about the blowout. I won't go in cash because it's obviously a great matchup. And, maybe Lowry and DeRozan can do a lot of things in 3 quarters. But the matchup scares me a little bit as far as the line. Carroll and Biyombo kind of in the same sort of situation. Ian Scola as well at 4.8. So just not really sure what the minutes are going to be tomorrow. So no cash, but maybe some tournament exposure here or there. Okay, let's keep moving. So next game is going to be Washington at Miami. We'll start with the line, if I can find it. It is 196.5, and the Heat are 7.5-point favorites. So it looks like we got some news on Wall. So he left early with a leg injury today, and it looks like he is officially okay. So it just came in that he is hopeful to play Monday. So obviously it's something you're going to have to monitor for sure, but I would kind of keep track of that. Obviously, if he is able to play, he's just been killing it lately. He had a great game today before leaving the game with that injury, but really good in the last 3 games. He was a little down against Phoenix, but they're a pretty good a defensive team, especially with Bledsoe and Knight. So that's a little to be expected. But even his bad game was 38 fantasy points. So wasn't like it was really bad. And then the two before that, he was at 64 DraftKings points and 66 DraftKings points. So obviously just killing it. He's at 86, which is still so low. I'm not sure why he is really low. And so 86 puts him at 38 DraftKings points implied, which is crazy. I don't know why. So if he's able to play and we're confident that he's going to, kind of be the same guy that he's been, and this injury is not going to be a big deal, then I think that you really got to keep on targeting him in cash and tournaments for sure. Beal is kind of the same way. He's just been killing it lately. He's been, even though that same Suns matchup was pretty tough, he had 38 minutes and had 58 DraftKings points. He had 34 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Him and Wall kind of help each other out. So once Wall started going, Beal started going as well. And at 7-2, that puts him implied at 31.8. So really, really low. So cash, I'm fine with all these guys. So we're really not sure whether Gortat's going to be back. He was out again Sunday. He's still away with his, I think he's visiting his mom who's sick. So we're not sure whether he's going to be back from Monday. I would think it's fairly questionable right now since we haven't heard anything. So I think that bumps up potentially Porter a little bit, who's going to play the 4. And because Nene and Chris Humphreys were out. And I will say real quick that Ramon Sessions, if John Wall wasn't able to play because of this injury tomorrow, looks like he is hopeful. But if he's not able to play at 3-6, Ramon Sessions would be the guy that you want as far as filling in. And probably, I'm not sure if it would be a huge bump to Beal. I guess you could think, him and Porter would have a little bit higher usage, but I'm not sure if it's going to be good usage. I'm just not, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that it would be. Wall helps them get into really good spots with his passing. So I'm kind of skeptical that even the increased usage would do a whole lot for their fantasy value. I think it'd probably be a break-even thing. And then you could think about Dudley, especially with all these injuries at 4-3 is reasonable too. So I think a lot of good potential plays on the Washington side. On Miami side, we have all these guys are fairly cheap. We got Bosch and Whiteside at both at 7-3, so that puts them. Let's see, implied point total for that. So that puts them at 32 fantasy points, which it seems low. I think this is a great spot to target Bosch. I mean, we're talking. Potentially Porter is going to get a lot of run at 4. Dudley is going to get a lot of run at the 4, maybe even play some 5. So it's, I don't know, like Ryan Hollins is their starting center right now. He's playing, he's not playing a ton. He's playing like 13, 15 minutes for them, just kind of spot start. But you would expect that both Bosch and Whiteside are just so much more talented than those guys. So I think this is a great spot to target both of them in cash or tournaments, really, just because Washington cannot really deal with their talent on the front line with all those injuries. I think if Gortat ends up coming back, then that makes it a little more interesting. I still think that they're probably pretty reasonably priced. It's not like Gortat can fend them both, so I still think I would like Bosch. I may be a little more down on Whiteside. That might move him to tournament only, but if he's out for sure, there's no one that can guard either of those guys. Wade is down at 6'9". He's been really good lately. His past games have been 33 fantasy points, 40, 48. So he's been playing not a ton of minutes, but he's been steady. He's been about 30 to 33 fantasy points. And at 6'9", that puts him implied 30. So right at kind of where he should be. So I think that he's fairly safe. Beal's a pretty good defender, but Wade hasn't shown that he's super dependent on matchup to be able to get his. So I think at 6'9", it's reasonable. He may not be getting a great value, but he has some upside there, so I don't mind targeting him in these matchups as well. Gerald Green has been the guy to have if Luol Deng continues to be out, which it looks like he will be again, he's got this hamstring injury, and I haven't seen any word that he's coming back. He was out Saturday. And Gerald Green has not been great lately, but is getting the minutes. So I don't think you could go him in cash, but I think that if you're kind of looking for the minutes, maybe a potential to blow up, he's the guy to take that chance on. Yeah, that's about it. Keep on moving. Boston at New Orleans. Let's see what we got here. 214 over under, and the Pelicans are 1-point favorites. So finally a high over under game. It's obviously pretty significantly the highest that we've got so far. The only one that's close to it is Phoenix at Chicago, which would be the next game. They're 204.5, and they're a full 10 points lower. So this is obviously the game to target tomorrow as far as the Vegas line. So we'll start with Boston. So it looks like Marcus Smart continues to be out. He's going to be out probably through Christmas. It looks like David Lee's probably not going to play. Let's see. So he didn't practice today and is questionable for tomorrow. So I would assume that if he's not able to practice, that would be kind of a questionable, leaning towards doubtful. But obviously check that for sure. So we'll kind of start at the top. Isaiah Thomas is at 7-7. He's the highest priced guy. He's been good lately. He had a fairly tough matchup the other night. He had 36 minutes against San Antonio and dropped 44 DraftKings points. He had 23, 4, and 8 with 2 steals. He had 51 the game before that against Sacramento. So at 7-7, that puts him implied point total of 34.13. So obviously he's been crushing that the last couple games. And I'm not too worried about this matchup for sure. Drew is a fairly decent defender, but he's not getting a ton of minutes, and he's kind of sharing them with both Ish and Tyreek. So kind of just a revolving cast of characters, and none of those guys I'm really worried about. And plus, Isaiah is not really dependent upon matchup, just because all of his value comes from how good he is in the pick and roll, and none of those guys are really. Drew's pretty good defending the pick and roll, but Isaiah's just so crafty, and he's able to kind of deal with the fact that he's so much smaller than guys. Like, matchups don't worry me so much with him just because he's been kind of dealing with him his whole life being so small. So at 7-7, I think he's definitely in play in cash and tournaments for sure. Bradley has been killing it lately. He's played really good real-life basketball. He's had at least 4 3-pointers in the last 2 games. His DraftKings points didn't end up that great, even though he started the game hot against San Antonio. Ended up with 27 DraftKings points, but before that he was up at 32 and 40. At 6'4", that would put him implied point total of just 28. So I think that he's pretty safe here in this matchup, 6'4". Against New Orleans in this really high total, where I'm fine with him in cash in tournaments. He's probably not my favorite tournament play because I'm not sure if he has the upside of some of these other guys at shooting guard spot. But especially like a guy like Jamal Crawford, who is going to be lower and we assume has upside at a much lower price point. But I think Avery Bradley is in a pretty good spot here. Jared Sullinger's at 6'2", at center. His minutes have been really all over the place. He's at 27, 14, 34, and 27. And part of it's just been because he's been struggling. He's only taken 6 shots per game in the last 2 games. So I don't think he is in cash gameplay just because I'm not sure what he's going to be. Obviously, he's intriguing because David Lee could potentially be out. But I'm not really sure who those minutes are going to go to. Whether they're going to go to him or whether Amir is going to play a little bit more. Amir Johnson played 32 minutes against San Antonio, had a good game. So I don't know. I'm probably not either in cash just because I'm not sure who's going to get the minutes from Lee and really just the minutes in general. I think they would probably like them to go to Sullinger, but if he's not going to play well, I don't think Brad Stevens is going to play them. So I think they're both intriguing in tournaments because you can just kind of guess and, probably one of them is going to have a good game in this high total game. The problem is I'm not sure where the minute distribution is going to be, and you don't want to be guessing in cash games. Jay Crowder's at 5'5". He's had really safe minutes. He's been over 30 minutes the last 5 games, and let's see, puts him implied point total 5-5 of 24.01. So he's obviously been about there or a little bit more potentially over the last 5. Yeah, he's been right around there, a smidge more. So a guy that I think is, okay. It's not a guy that I'm really struggling to get into my lineup. I think he's okay. I think he'll probably hit value. I don't think he'll exceed it by a lot. And I don't think he has a ton of upside. So, kind of just an average play, but not the worst in the world. Evan Turner's at 4.9. His minutes, he gets them every once in a while. He got 30, he got 27, 32, but then before that, he's at 21 and 21. Marcus Smart obviously opens up some minutes for him, but we're not really sure what it's going to be. So, again, another no cash, but tournaments, okay. And Amira we talked about before. So, on New Orleans side, Anthony Davis is at 10-7, which I think you've got to really consider him here in cash in tournaments. I think he is probably going to be one of the top plays. Implied point total that puts him at 47.93. So obviously pretty high, but he's been the last couple games, his last 4, he's been at 60, 56, 61, and 62. So obviously kind of destroying the 48 DraftKings points. So and just the fact that this game is really the only one that is even in the teens as far as 200s go, I think he's a guy that you really have to target. I'm going to try to get him in most of my lineups and especially my cash. I know it's sometimes hard to get a guy that expensive. He's $1,300 more than every other player. Blake Griffin is 9.4, and he is $1,300 more than that. So I know it's hard to kind of justify that, but I think that this spot is good enough where it warrants it. So definitely Brow, I think is good to roll out for sure. Tyreek's at 7.1, which puts him in implied point total of, let's see here, of 32. In the last several games, he's been at 37, 32, 45. So I think he's safe. I think that you could go in cash, honestly. I was going to wait just a little bit longer, but the last 3 games, he's been really consistent with both his minutes and, where he's been at as far as his production goes. So I think that I'm officially fine with him in cash. And I think there's a lot of upside in tournaments too because of this implied point total being so high. And then I guess you could look at some of these other guys. Ish is at 6.6, but his minutes have been down since Tyreek has came back. Ryan Anderson is at 6.1. You could go in the tournaments. Potentially he could get hot. Eric Gordon's at 5.3. So kind of just the same story for all these guys. I think Brow is almost a must play if you can fit him. Tyreek is a great play, and then everyone else is tournament only. Keep on moving. We got 3 games left. Clippers at the Timberwolves. Over-under is – we don't have an over-under, it looks like. Yep, they haven't released it yet, probably because they're waiting on Chris Paul news. But the over-under, it looks like the Clippers are 1-point favorites, I think. So Chris Paul is potentially – so he's already been ruled out. Okay, so Chris Paul is already ruled out, and so that really changes things. Obviously, that gives Blake a bump, and at 9.4, he is really solid in cash gameplay. He played 39 minutes last game, had 54 fantasy points. He had 28 points, 13 rebounds, 7 assists, kind of doing everything. It's not obviously not a point guard or anything, but he's actually probably the best distributor the Clippers have without Chris Paul. If they're playing Austin Rivers and Jamal Crawford and those guys a lot of minutes. Really, Blake Griffin and Lance Stevenson are probably the 2 best creators on their team. So he's got some assist upside. And at 9.4, I think he is kind of a lock to hit value for sure. The matchup doesn't scare me a ton. So implied points puts him at 42 DraftKings points. So I think that's kind of a definite that he's going to hit that. So he is for sure playable really in all contest formats. DeAndre is just kind of naturally up and down. He is a guy that's not really dependent on a jump shot, but it's kind of dependent on guys getting him the ball near the basket where you can dunk it. He's really dependent on having a good rebound game, and that potentially be a little bit tougher in this game against Town. So I think he's probably tournament only, but at 7K is definitely reasonable enough where I think you should probably have some pretty good exposure to him for sure. Um, and then for the Clippers, he's really the only guy that I'm looking at other than this. I know Austin Rivers is a guy that a lot of people are kind of always on when Chris Paul's out. He's at 4K, so I know that's like somewhat interesting to people, but he's just not doing anything with minutes. I mean, he got a bunch of minutes the last couple games with Chris Paul out, and 29 minutes against Orlando, and he had 14 points, or 14 DraftKings points. He had 35 minutes against Indiana, and he had 12 and a half DraftKings points. So I don't know. You could probably try to figure out, how many minutes does Austin Rivers have to get in order to hit 30 DraftKings points, and it's probably I don't know, 80 minutes to hit their 30 DraftKings points, kind of what he's on pace for. So I don't think you could play him. Not interested. But Jamal for sure is the play here at 5'6". They priced him up pretty high from where he was last game at 49, but last game he played really well. He had 31 minutes and had 32 real life points, 1 rebound, 5 assists, and ended up with 43 DraftKings points. So you would assume that he's probably going to get the same sort of minute load here with Chris Paul. He's gotten 31, 37 respectively with Chris Paul being out. And I think it's pretty much a lock to hit value. I know he's somewhat scoring dependent for sure. So it's a little worrisome about his cash game floor. So I get being worried about that. But really at his price point and the fact that he's playing so many minutes at shooting guard where it's already pretty tough, I think it's going to be hard to get off him. So he's at 24 implied points. So I think he's pretty reasonably safe to hit that 24 DraftKings points. So I think he's fine. Obviously, he's not a greatest value, being up at 5'6" from where he was 4K just a game ago, but it's fine. On the other side, Wiggins is at 7K. He's the highest guy. It's been a little down lately. He's getting a ton of minutes regardless, so there's always upside that he could potentially go off. And really, there's no wing defender. I mean, I guess Lance is okay, but if that's really what you're worried about, then you're probably liking the spot. No wing defender I'm really worried about on LA to bother him. So I don't think you can go him in cash just because of his inconsistency, and he is very much so scoring dependent right now in this part of his career. So it's not something you really want to bank on in cash. I don't think he's really going to be cash playable for a while into his careers because of just the nature of how he plays. But in tournaments, for sure, there's a lot of upside in this matchup. And I would assume it'll be fairly high over-under. Karl Towns killed it last game. He had 32 minutes. He had 27 points, 12 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, ended up with 50 DraftKings points. So obviously a killer game. This is a little bit of a tougher matchup against Blake and DeAndre, but at 6'9", that puts him at 30 DraftKings points. So obviously he, destroyed that last game. He was a little down before that. He had 22 minutes against Orlando, had 19 DraftKings points, but was up at 35, then was down to 21. So, yeah, I'm a little worried about the minutes. So I'm probably not going to go cash here, but you definitely have to have exposure in tournaments because he could do exactly what he did last game, which is go off. Ricky Rubio is kind of the same deal for me. He has a lower floor than I like in cash and kind of a lower minute threshold than I like in cash. Last 3 games, he's bet 34 minutes, 27 minutes, 21 minutes, and his DraftKings points have kind of followed suit. 6'6" is reasonable. That puts him right at 29 DraftKings points. So, a good spot here without Chris Paul. It's really a great time to target him in a tournament, but I'm just skeptical in cash. So no cash, but a great spot to target him in tournaments for sure. And then I guess maybe you could take a look at these other guys. Jang has been pretty good in the last couple games. He's at 4.8. He's been playing for about 25 to 30 minutes. Last game, 23 DraftKings points, 28, 35 DraftKings points. So fairly decent. But again, this isn't a great matchup against Blake and DeAndre. So not a guy I'm looking at in cash for sure. And I'm just not sure if it's a great upside matchup for him either. So it's kind of it for me. Kevin Martin's down here at 3.7, but I mean he's still getting over 20 minutes. But talk about a guy who's dependent upon scoring. I just don't think there's a lot of upside there. So yeah, two more games. Phoenix at Chicago. Over-under is 204.5. Chicago is 6-point favorites. Start on Phoenix side. Let's see here. All right, so Bledsoe is 8-2. He's coming off back-to-back, I believe. Yeah, so they played the early game, and so he had a good game. He's had a bunch of just really solid games in a row. He's been at 41, 42, 37, 50 DraftKings points before today. So really solid. At his implied point total is at 36. So I think that in this matchup, obviously Chicago's a fairly good defense, but Derrick Rose isn't particularly great. So I think this is a great matchup for him and Knight probably. I guess you could try to figure out which one Jimmy Butler's going to guard. I would guess Bledsoe. Yeah, I would probably guess he would guard Bledsoe, so maybe that worries me a little bit more. But I think that he's still fairly underpriced considered to where he's supposed to be, so I wouldn't be too worried about it. So maybe cash game play. I think it's a pretty okay cash game play, but definitely for sure in tournaments he has upside. And Brandon Knight's the same kind of deal for me. He's been really solid lately. His minutes been high. He's been about 38 minutes the last several. And he's been at a pretty good price point, 7.7 on DraftKings. Again, I would assume that Jimmy would probably guard Bledsoe, but he could potentially go against Knight. DVP would have Butler against Knight because Knight's a shooting guard and Bledsoe's a point guard, but I think they kind of play opposite that way in real life, actually. So I think they're both average cash game plays and really good tournament plays. Probably Bledsoe the most of those two. Markieff is coming off a game. Let me see where he was because I'm not even sure if he played today. I know I checked close to halftime, and he hadn't even got in the game. Sorry, I know this is great podcasting. So he didn't even play today, and I'm not sure why. I was actually trying to figure that out earlier. He was a healthy scratch. Okay, so I'm seeing the news right now. So I'm not sure why. He had that weird technical foul the game before where he kept on walking back and forth between the free throw line just to kind of mess with the refs. And I don't know what he was doing, but he got that technical, and maybe it just made the Suns management mad, or maybe it made Hornacek mad. I don't know, but he was obviously available to play today and didn't even get in the game. So I don't think you go him in cash for sure, and I would really monitor that situation. I don't think you probably play him at all if we don't really get word what's going to happen or whether he's going to play. You don't want a zero in your lineup. So I would worry about that for sure. Kind of wait for tomorrow. If he doesn't play, potential bump to, these guys that we've been focusing on, Warren a little bit, John Lure a little bit, and Len. They're all still pretty good price points. And the question is kind of figuring out how they're going to distribute the minutes for them. I mean, kind of up and down. A lot of it's probably dependent on how Lure and Alex Len have done in foul trouble, but I just really haven't been able to predict it that well, how they're going to do. So definitely no cash for me. So it looks like I'm not really on cash for any of these Phoenix guys, but potentially, depending on really just Markieff, we have to know his news of what's going on before we, say a whole lot about the other guys. Lure would be a great play if Markieff was out, assuming that Tyson Chandler is going to be out as well. But obviously, if Markieff is going to be back in and playing his heavy minute load, then that changes things. So check in tomorrow for sure. On Chicago's side, Jimmy's at 7-7, right where Knight is. He's been good lately. The last 2 games, he's bet 41 DraftKings points and 35. 7-7 puts him at 34.13. So he is, right next to Knight, and they're the 2 highest priced shooting guards in the slate. I don't particularly love this matchup for Butler, so I'm not going to be on him in cash really, especially with Batum is 2 points or $200 cheaper. You have Beal who's cheaper, Tyreek who's cheaper, and then you could even go down to Bryan, who we said we liked, and Crawford if you want to go even cheaper than that. So a lot of shooting guards actually I like, which is a bit surprising. Just because normally shooting guards is fairly ugly. So I'm not sure I'm going to pay up 7-7 for Jimmy, but you should probably have some exposure in tournaments. Pau Gasol's at 7-5, been killing it lately. He had 42 DraftKings points in 26 minutes against Charlotte. In the last 2 games, he has had over 30 minutes, and he's had 62 DraftKings points and 49. So obviously, potentially no. I would assume Tyson Chandler is still going to be out. He was sat out with his hamstring injury on Saturday. We don't have word, but I would guess he's going to be out because he hasn't practiced yet. So no Tyson Chandler, potentially no Markieff is a really good matchup for Powell. There's really no one, potentially. I know Lynn's long, but he's, Powell's just a lot more skilled than he is right now. So that matchup is a really, really good one for Pau Gasol. So I think he's a guy that you could definitely go in cash for sure at 7-5, and obviously a great tournament play as well. Derrick Rose, this is a tough matchup against Bledsoe and Brandon Knight. Really, either one would guard him. So I'm not on him. I never go Derrick Rose in cash, so it would be only a tournament that I'm looking him in. And I guess you could have some shares at 6-4, wouldn't kill you, but not really interested in Derrick Rose in this particular matchup. Mirotic is always a little interesting, but his minutes just been all over the place. He had 27, then 5, 24, 29. Hasn't really been doing with anything with him. Definitely no cash, and I'm not even really in love with tournaments either. And that's kind of it. Potentially you could look at Joe. Joe as in Joakim Noah. He's had 22 minutes, 35 minutes, 23. So obviously that outlier is the Denver game where he got 35 minutes. But he's been 25 DraftKings points or more the last 3. I think that's a little points chasey. And at 4-6, there's not a ton of value there. So I don't think there's a lot of upside. I wouldn't go in the cash. So I would probably ignore Joe tomorrow. Last game, Portland at Milwaukee. Over-under is 198. And it is a pick'em right now. So let's see here. All right, so starting with Portland, we got Dame at 8-8, puts implied points at 39. So he obviously has been above that the last couple games. He's got a high minute load. He had 35 DraftKings points, then 47 and 53 the last 3. So I think it's a pretty good spot for him. Potentially Milwaukee's supposed to be a tough. It says their DVP is the toughest against point guards. But I'm not even really sure who's going to play point guard for Milwaukee. It's just been kind of really up in the air lately. You have Michael Carter-Williams, Jared Bayless, and Tyler Ennis, all who have been kind of rotating in and out. Michael Carter-Williams has come back to play a little bit more, so maybe he's back in the good graces of Jason Kidd. And Jared Bayless. Okay, so it looks like Jared Bayless is actually going to be out. He's got this ankle injury. I know it kept him out Saturday, but it looks like it's going to keep him out for a while too. So I would assume that it would be a lot of Michael Carter-Williams. And in that regard, potentially his length would bother Lillard. So maybe you move off of him in cash and go a cheaper option, maybe an Isaiah Thomas or or someone like that in cash games. But at his price point, there's obviously some upside. So I don't hate that. 8-8 is fairly good price for Dame. So in tournaments, I'm definitely fine. McCollum's at 6-6, which is kind of where he's always been. The last two, he's had the exact same score, 39.25 DraftKings points. I think this is a pretty good matchup for him. Middleton and Giannis are pretty good. But I think that he will have a fairly high usage. He's been taking he had 17 field goals, 20 field goals, 21, 15, 20 the last several. So he's taking 20 shots a game, which is just a ton. So at 6'6", a guy who's going to take that many shots is a guy that I definitely want to look at. You could potentially be off of him in the matchup, kind of like Dame for cash. But if they're going to take that many shots between the two of them, you always going to have some tournament exposure to them. And then the other guys you got to look at, Mason Plumlee is not safe enough to go cash, and not even a ton of upside here for tournaments. So not really on him. I think Aminu had been really bad, but he has been okay the last two. Not enough to go cash, but potentially some tournaments if you're just kind of looking for some place to go on small forward where it is admittedly fairly ugly. So I definitely get that. Ed Davis has been good lately. He's at 5K, so you could go that route if you want to. If you want to, I'm not sure I'm going to go him in cash, but I think that you could potentially look at him in some lineups in tournaments because at 5K it could get you some potentially salary relief to get some of these other guys in, especially if you want to get potentially Anthony Davis in. You want to pair him with a lower price power forward. On the other side, Monroe is at 6'9", which is he was at 7K a couple games ago. Now he's at 6'9", and has had 2 back-to-back 40 fantasy point games. Portland's always a pretty good matchup against big men. DDP says it's 28th. It's a little misleading because Terry Stotts is always, he's infamous for not really telling us who is going to be starting or playing in the front court. So we're not really sure he's going to go against, but I'm not sure there's any guys that I'm really worried about. Put some implied point to 30.45 for Monroe at his price point, which is obviously he's been 10 over that the last couple. So I think he's definitely playable in cash in tournaments for sure. Giannis is at 6'6", and I don't trust him in cash. Same with Michael Carter-Williams and Chris Middleton. I think Michael Carter-Williams is probably a pretty elite tournament play tomorrow with Bayless being out and going against Portland. Dame and CJ. CJ is okay. Dame is not a very good defender at all. Probably one of the worst point guard ones in the league, actually. So I think Michael Carter-Williams is a definite great to elite tournament play at 5'5". DraftKings salary. So I definitely would target him a lot, but I don't trust any of these guys, even including MCW. Giannis, MCW, Middleton, even Mayo at 4.9 has been priced up here. So he's $500 and more than he was last game, even though he's been playing well. So another guy you want to look at, but probably not guys that I'm going to go with in cash. Mayo potentially still in cash range. Puts him 49 puts him at 21. So yeah, he's definitely playing cash for sure at that low price point, considering where he's been, especially no Bayless. So so I'm on Mayo, but the other guys are definite tournament plays, and I'll probably have some exposure to them for sure. And Monroe for sure. So potentially, last week we were thinking that maybe we would just avoid Milwaukee for a while, and now they're actually kind of getting things together. So a lot of it was just the fact that they were deep, and you just don't want to deal with deep teams. Like we saw today with some teams that were just playing 15 guys, 12 minutes, and that doesn't do anything for us. But we also see with Washington, a team that is shorthanded, so they're playing their guys a lot, and that's obviously valuable to us from a fantasy perspective because guys get a lot of usage and a lot of minutes to rack up stats. So always something to be mindful of is have the depth of teams and who's going to play and how it affects minutes for sure. So those are my thoughts. That's the slate. Feel free to ask me any questions on Twitter or whatever, and we'll talk to you guys Tuesday with Jay for the Wednesday slate. So you guys take care. Good luck.